A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. Chapter 9. The Hill of the Holy Beacon. At the Madras terminus in the South Indian Railway, Subramanya and I board a carriage on the Ceylon boat train. For several hours we roll onward through the most variegated scenes. Green stretches of growing rice alternate with gaunt red hills. Shady plantations of stately coconut trees are followed by scattered peasants toiling in the paddy fields. As I sit at the window, the swift Indian dusk begins to blot out the landscape, and I turn my head to muse of other things. I begin to wonder at the strange things which have happened since I have worn the golden ring which Brahma has given me, for my plants have changed their face. A concatenation of unexpected circumstances has arisen to drive me farther south, instead of going farther east as I have intended. Is it possible, I ask myself, that these golden claws hold a stone which really possesses the mysterious power which the yogi has claimed for it? Although I endeavor to keep an open mind, it's difficult for any Westerner of scientifically trained mind to credit the idea. I dismiss the speculation from my mind, but do not succeed in driving away the uncertainty which lurks at the back of my thoughts. Why is it that my footsteps have been so strangely guided to the mountain hermitage whither I am traveling? Why is it that two men who both wear the yellow robe have been coupled as destiny's agents to the extent of directing my reluctant eyes towards the Maharishi? I use the word destiny not in its common sense, but because I am at a loss for a better one. Past experience has taught me full well that seemingly unimportant happenings sometimes play an unexpected part in composing the picture of one's life. We leave the train, and with it the main line, 40 miles of Pondicherry, that pathetic little remnant of France's territorial possessions in India. We go over to a quiet, little-used branch railroad, which runs into the interior, and wait for nearly 2 hours in the semi-gloom of a bleak waiting room. The holy man paces along the bleaker platform outside, his tall figure looking half ghost, half real in the starlight. At last, the ill-timed train, which puffs infrequently up and down the line, carries us away. There are but few other passengers. I fall into a fitful, dream-broken sleep which continues for some hours until my companion awakes me. We descend at a little wayside station, and the train screeches and grinds away into the silent darkness. Night's life has not quite run out, so we sit in a bare, comfortless little waiting room, whose small kerosene lamp we light ourselves. We wait patiently while day fights with darkness for supremacy. When a pale dawn emerges at last, creeping bit by bit through a small barred window in the back of our room, I peer out at such portion of our surroundings as becomes visible. Out of the morning haze there arises the faint outline of a solitary hill, apparently some few miles distant. The base of it is impressive, and the body of ample girth, but the head is not to be seen, being yet thick shrouded in the dawn mists. My guide ventures outside, where he discovers a man loudly snoring in his tiny bullock cart. A shout or two brings the driver back to his mundane existence, thus making him aware of business waiting in the offing. When informed of our destination, He seems but too eager to transport us. I gaze somewhat dubiously at his narrow conveyance, a bamboo canopy balanced on 2 wheels. Anyway, we clamber aboard and the man bundles the luggage after us. The holy man manages to compress himself into the minimum space which a human being can possibly occupy. I crouch under the long canopy with legs dangling out in space. The driver squats upon the shaft between his bulls with his chin almost touching his knees, and the problem of accommodation being thus solved more or less satisfactorily, we bid him be off. Our progress is anything but rapid, despite the best efforts of a pair of strong, small, white bullocks. These charming creatures are very useful as draft animals in the interior of India because they endure heat better than horses and are less fastidious in the matter of diet. The customs of the quiet villages and small townships of the interior have not changed very much in the course of centuries. The bullock carts, which transported the traveler from place to place in BC 100, transport him still 2,000 years after. Our driver, whose face is the color of beaten bronze, has taken much pride in his animals. Their long, beautifully curved horns are adorned with shapely gilt ornaments. Their thin legs have tinkling brass bells tied to them. He guides them by means of a rein threaded through their nostrils, while their feet merrily jog away upon the dust-laden road. I watch the quick tropic dawn come on apace. An attractive landscape shapes itself, both on our right and left. No drab, flat plain this, for heights and hillocks are not long absent from the eyes, whenever one searches the horizon's length. The road traverses a district of red earth dotted with terrains of scrubby thorn bush and a few bright emerald paddy fields. A peasant with toil-worn face passes us. No doubt he is going to his long day's work in the field. Soon we overtake a girl with a brass water pitcher mounted upon her head. A single vermilion robe is wrapped around her body, but her shoulders are left bare. A blood-colored ruby ornaments one nostril, and a pair of gold bracelets gleams on her arms in the pale morning sunlight. The blackness of her skin reveals her as a Dravidian, as indeed most of the inhabitants of these parts probably are, save the Brahmins and Mohammedans. These Dravidian girls are usually gay and happy by nature. I find them more talkative than their brown countrywomen and more musical in voice. The girl stares at us with unfeigned surprise, and I guess that Europeans rarely visit this part of the interior. So we ride on until the little township is reached. Its houses are prosperous looking and arranged into streets which cluster around 2 sides of an enormous temple. If I am not mistaken, the latter is 1/4 mile long. I gather a rough conception of its architectural massiveness a while later when we reach one of its spacious gateways. We halt for a minute or two, and I peer inside to register some fleeting glimpses of the place. Its strangeness is as impressive as its size. Never before have I seen a structure like this. A vast quadrangle surrounds the enormous interior, which looks like a labyrinth. I perceive that the 4 high enclosing walls have been scorched and colored by hundreds of years of exposure to the fierce tropical sun. Each wall is pierced by a single gateway, above which rises a strange superstructure consisting of a giant pagoda. The latter seems strangely like an ornate sculptured pyramid. Its lower part is built of stone, but the upper portion seems to be thickly plastered brickwork. The pagoda is divided into many stories, but the entire surface is profusely decorated with a variety of figures and carvings. In addition to these 4 entrance towers, I count no less than 5 others which rise up within the interior of the temple. How curiously they remind one of Egyptian pyramids in the similarity of outline. My last glimpse is of long, roofed cloisters, of serried ranks, of flat stone pillars in large numbers, of great central enclosure, of dim shrines and dark corridors, and many little buildings. I make a mental note to explore this interesting place before long. The bullocks trot off, and we emerge into the open country again. The scenes which we pass are quite pretty. The road is covered with red dust. On either side there are low bushes and occasional clumps of tall trees. There are many birds hidden among the branches, for I fear the flutter of their wings as well as the last notes of that beautiful chorus which is the morning song all over the world. Dotted along the route are a number of charming little wayside shrines. The differences of architectural style surprise me until I conclude that they have been erected during changing epochs. Some are highly ornate, over-decorated, and elaborately carved in the usual Hindu manner, but the larger ones are supported by flat surface pillars, which I have seen nowhere else but in the south. There are even 2 or 3 shrines whose classical severity of outline is almost Grecian. I judge that we have now traveled about 5 or 6 miles when we reach the lower slopes of the hill, whose vague outline I have seen from the station. It rises like a reddish-brown giant in the clear morning sunlight. The mists have now rolled away, revealing a broad skyline at the top. It is an isolated upland of red soil and brown rock, barren for the most part, with large tracts almost treeless, and with masses of stone split into great boulders tossed about in chaotic disorder. Arunachala, the sacred red mountain, exclaims my companion, noticing the direction of my gaze. A fervent expression of adoration passes across his face. He is momentarily wrapped in ecstasy, like some medieval saint. I ask him, "Does the name mean anything?" "I have just given you the meaning," he replies with a smile. "The name is composed of 2 words, Aruna and Achala, which means red mountain, and since it is also the name of the presiding deity of the temple, its full translation would be Sacred Red Mountain." Then where does the holy beacon come in? Once a year the temple priests celebrate their central festival. Immediately that occurs within the temple, a huge fire blazes out on top of the mountain, its flame being fed with vast quantities of butter and camphor. It burns for many days and can be seen for many miles around. Whoever sees it at once prostrates himself before it. It symbolizes the fact that this mountain is sacred ground, overshadowed by a great deity. The hill now towers over our heads. It is not without its rugged grandeur. This lonely peak, patterned with red, brown, and gray boulders, thrusting its flat head thousands of feet into the pearly sky. Whether the holy man's words have affected me, or whether for some unaccountable cause, I find a strange feeling of awe arising within me as I meditate upon the picture of the sacred mountain, and I gaze up wonderingly at the steep incline of Aranchala. Do you know, whispers my companion, that this mountain is not only esteemed holy ground, but the local traditions dare to assert that the gods placed it there to mark the spiritual center of the world. This little bit of legend forces me to smile. How naive it is. At length, I learn that we are approaching the Maharishi's hermitage. We turn aside from the road and move down a rough path, which brings us to a thick grove of coconut and mango trees. We cross this until the path suddenly comes to an abrupt termination before an unlocked gate. The driver descends and pushes the gate open and then drives us into the large unpaved courtyard. I stretch out my cramped limbs, descend to the ground, and look around. The cloistered domain of the Maharishi is hemmed in at the front by closely growing trees and a thickly clustered garden. It is screened at the back and side by hedgerows of shrub and cactus, while away to the west stretches the scrub jungle and what appears to be dense forest. It is most picturesquely placed on a lower spur of the hill. Secluded and apart, it seems a fitting spot for those who wish to pursue profound themes of meditation. Two small buildings with thatched roofs occupy the left side of the courtyard. Adjoining them stands a long modern structure, whose red-tiled roof comes sharply down into overhanging eaves. A small veranda stretches across a part of the front. The center of the courtyard is marked by a large well. I watch a boy who is naked to the waist and dark-skinned to the point of blackness, slowly drawing a bucket of water to the surface with the aid of a creaking hand windlass. The sound of our entry brings a few men out of the buildings into the courtyard. Their dress is extremely varied. One is garbed in nothing but a ragged loincloth, but another is prosperously attired in a white silk robe. They stare questioningly at us. My guide grins hugely, evidently enjoying their astonishment. He crosses to them and he says something in Tamil. The expression on their faces changes immediately, for they smile in unison and they beam at me with pleasure. I like their faces and their bearing. We shall now go into the hall of the Maharishi, announces the holy man of the yellow robe, bidding me to follow him. I pause outside the uncovered stone veranda and remove my shoes. I gather up a little pile of fruits, which I have brought as an offering, and pass into an open doorway. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. The midday meal is over. The sun, unmercifully, raises the afternoon temperature to a degree I have never before experienced. But then, we are now at a latitude not so far from the equator. For once, I am grateful that India is favored with a climate which does not foster activity, because most of the people have disappeared into the shady groves to take a siesta. I can therefore approach the Maharishi in the way I prefer, without undue notice or fuss. I enter the large hall and sit down near him. He half reclines upon some white cushions placed on the divan. An attendant pulls steadily at the cord which operates the punkah fan. The soft burr of the rope and the gentle swish of the fan as it moves through the sultry air sound pleasantly in my ears. The Maharishi holds a folded manuscript book in his hands. He is writing something with extreme slowness. A few minutes later, after my entry, he puts the book aside and calls a disciple. A few words pass between them in Tamil, and the man tells me that his master wishes to reiterate his regrets at my inability to partake of their food. He explains that they live a simple life, and never having catered for Europeans before, do not know what the latter eat. I thank the Maharishi and say that I shall be glad to share their unspiced dishes with them. For the rest, I shall procure some food from the township. I add that I regard the question of diet as being far less important than the quest which has brought me to his hermitage. The sage listens intently, his face calm, imperturbable, and non-committal. It is a good object, he comments at length. This encourages me to enlarge upon the same theme. Master, I have studied our Western philosophies and sciences, lived and worked among people of our crowded cities, tasted their pleasures, and allowed myself to be caught up in their ambitions. Yet I have also gone into solitary places and wandered there amid the loneliness of deep thought. I have questioned the sages of the West. Now I have turned my face towards the East. I seek more light. The Maharishi nods his head as if to say, yes, I quite understand. I have heard many opinions, listened to many theories. Intellectual proofs of one belief or another lie piled up all around me. I am tired of them, skeptical of anything which cannot be proved by personal experience. Forgive me for saying so, but I am not religious. Is there anything beyond man's material existence? If so, how can I realize it for myself? The 3 or 4 devotees who are gathered around us stare in surprise. Have I offended the subtle etiquette of the hermitage by speaking so brusquely and boldly to their master? I do not know. Perhaps I do not care. The accumulated weight of many years' desire has unexpectedly escaped my control and passed beyond my lips. If the Maharishi is the right kind of man, surely he will understand and brush aside mere lapses from convention. He makes no verbal reply, but appears to have dropped into some train of thought. Because there is nothing else to do, and because my tongue has now been loosened, I address him for the 3rd time. The wise men of the West, our scientists, are greatly honored for their cleverness, yet they have confessed that they can throw but little light upon the hidden truth behind life. It is said there are some in your land who can give what our Western sages fail to reveal. Is this so? Can you assist me to experience enlightenment? Or is the search itself a mere delusion? I have now reached my conversational objective and decide to await the Maharishi's response. He continues to stare thoughtfully at me. Perhaps he is pondering over my questions. 10 minutes pass in silence. At last his lips open and he says gently, "You say I want to know. Tell me, who is that I?" What does he mean? Has he now cut across the services of the interpreter and speaks directly? No, he has now cut across the services of the interpreter and speaks directly to me in English. Bewilderment creeps across my brain. I'm afraid I do not understand your question, I reply blankly. Is it not clear? Think again. I puzzle over his words once more. An idea suddenly flashes into my head. I point a finger towards myself and mention my name. And do you know him? All my life, I smile back at him. But that is only your body. Again, I ask, who are you? I cannot find a ready answer to this extraordinary query. The Maharishi continues. Know first that I, and then you shall know the truth. My mind hazes again. I am deeply puzzled. Excuse me. This bewilderment finds verbal expression, but the Maharishi has evidently reached the limit of his English, for he turns to the interpreter, and the answer is slowly translated to me. There is only one thing to be done. Look into yourself. Do this in the right way, and you shall find the answer to all your problems. It is a strange rejoinder, but I ask him, what must one do? What method can I pursue? Through deep reflection on the nature of oneself and through constant meditation, the light can be found. I have frequently given myself up to meditation upon the truth, but I see no signs of progress. How do you know that no progress has been made? It's not easy to perceive one's progress in the spiritual realm. Is the help of a master necessary? It might be. Can a master help a man look into his own self in the way that you suggest? He can give the man all he needs for his quest. Such a thing can perceive through personal experience. Such a thing can be perceived through personal experience. How long will it take to get some enlightenment with a master's help? It all depends on the maturity of the seeker's mind. The gunpowder catches fire in an instant, while much time is needed to set fire to the coal. I receive a strange feeling that the sage dislikes to discuss the subject of masters and their methods. Yet my mental pertinacity is strong enough to override this feeling, and I address a further question on the matter to him. He turns a stolid face towards the window, gazes out at the expanse of hilly landscape beyond, and vouchsafes no answer. I take the hint and drop the subject. Will the Maharishi express an opinion about the future of the world? For we are living in critical times. Why should you trouble yourself about the future? Demands the sage. You do not even properly know about the present. Take care of the present. The future will then take care of itself. Another rebuff. But I do not yield so easily on this occasion, for I come from a world where the tragedies of life press far more heavily on people than they do in this peaceful jungle retreat. Will the world soon enter a new era of friendliness and mutual help, or will it go down into chaos and war? I persist. The Maharishi does not seem at all pleased, but nevertheless he makes a reply. There is one, capital O, there is one who governs the world, and it is his outlook to look after the world. He who has given life to the world knows how to look after it also. He bears the burden of this world, not you. Yet if one looks around with unprejudiced eyes, it's difficult to see where this benevolent regard comes in. I object. The sage appears to be less pleased, yet his answer comes. As you are, so is the world. Without understanding yourself, what is the use of trying to understand the world? This is a question that seekers after truth need not consider. People waste their energies over all such questions. First, find out the truth behind yourself. Then you will be in a better position to understand the truth behind the world. of which yourself is a part. There is an abrupt pause. An attendant approaches and lights another incense stick. The Maharishi watches the blue smoke curl its way upward, and then picks up his manuscript book. He unfolds its pages and begins to work on it again, thus dismissing me from the field of his intention. This renewed indifference of his plays like cold water upon my self-esteem. I sit around for another quarter of an hour, but I can see that he is in no mood to answer my questions. Feeling that our conversation is really at an end, I rise from the tiled floor, place my hands together in farewell, and leave him. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. Chapter 9. I have sent someone to the township with orders to fetch a conveyance, for I wish to inspect the temple. I request him to find a horsed carriage, if there is one in the place, for a bullock cart is picturesque to look at, but hardly as rapid and comfortable as one would wish. I find a two-wheeled pony carriage waiting for me as I enter the courtyard. It possesses no seat, but such an item no longer troubles me. The driver is a fierce-looking fellow with a soiled red turban on his head. His only other garment is a long piece of unbleached cloth made into a waistband, with one end passing between his thighs and then tucking into his waist. A long, dusty ride, and then, at last, the entrance to the great temple, with its rising stories of carved reliefs, greets us. I leave the carriage and begin a cursory exploration. I cannot say how old is the temple of Arunachala, remarks my companion in response to a question, but as you can see, its age must extend back hundreds of years. Around the gates and in the approaches to the temple are a few little shops and gaudy booths set up under overhanging palms. Beside them sit humbly dressed vendors of holy pictures and sellers with little brass images of Shiva and other gods. I am struck by the preponderance of representations of the former deity, for in other places Krishna and Ramana seem to hold first place. My guide offers an explanation. According to our sacred legends, the god Shiva once appeared as a flame of fire on top of the sacred red mountain. Therefore, the priests of the temple light the large beacon once a year in memory of this event, which must have happened thousands of years ago. I suppose the temple was built to celebrate it, as Shiva still overshadows the mountain. A few pilgrims are idly examining the stalls, where one can buy not only these little brass deities, but also gaudy chromolithographs picturing some event from the sacred stories, books of a religious character, blotchily printed in Tamil and Telugu languages, and colored paints wherewith to mark on one's forehead the fitting caste or sect symbol. A leprous beggar comes hesitatingly towards me. The flesh of his limbs is crumbling away. He is apparently not certain whether I shall have him driven off, poor fellow, or whether he will be able to touch my pity. His face is rigid with his terrible disease. I feel ashamed as I place some alms on the ground, but I fear to touch him. The gateway, which is shaped into a pyramid of carven figures, next engages my attention. This great towered portico looks like some pyramid out of Egypt, with its pointed top chopped off. Together with its three fellows, it dominates the countryside. One sees them miles away long before one approaches them. The face of the pagoda is lined with profuse carvings and quaint little statues. The subjects have been drawn from sacred myth and legend. They represent a strange jumble. One perceives the solitary forms of Hindu divinities entranced into devout meditation, or observes their entwined shapes engaged in amorous embraces, and one wonders. It reminds me that there is something in Hinduism for all tastes. Such is the all-inclusive nature of this creed. I enter the precincts of the temple to find myself in part of an enormous quadrangle. The vast structure encloses a labyrinth of colonnades, cloisters, galleries, shrines, rooms, corridors, covered and uncovered spaces. There is no stone building whose columned beauty stays one's emotions for a few minutes of silent wonder, as do those courts of the deities near Athens, but rather a gloomy sanctuary of dark mysteries. The vast recesses awe me with their chill air of aloofness. The place is a maze, but my companion walks with confident feet. Outside, the pagodas have looked attractive with their reddish stone coloring, but inside, the stonework is ashen gray. And here there's a footnote, and it says, "We Westerners may regard these deities as fantastic personifications of religious ideas, but the Hindu themselves do not doubt that they really exist as real beings." We pass through a long cloister with solid walls and flat, quaintly carved pillars supporting the roofs. We move into dim corridors and dark chambers, and eventually we arrive at a vast portico which stands in the outer court of this ancient fane. "The Hall of 1,000 Pillars," announces my guide as I gaze at the time-grade structure. A serried row of flat, carved, gigantic stone columns stretches before me. The place is lonely and deserted. Its monstrous pillars loom mysteriously out of the semi-gloom. I approach them more closely to study the old carvings which line many of their faces. Each pillar is composed of a single block of stone, and even the roof which it supports is composed of large, flat pieces of stone. Once again I see gods and goddesses disporting themselves with the help of the sculptor's art. Once again the carved faces of animals, familiar and unfamiliar, stare at me. We wander on across the flagstones of these pillared galleries, pass through dark passages, lit here and there by small bowl lamps, whose wicks are sunk in castor oil, and thus arrive near a central enclosure. It is pleasant to emerge once again in the bright sunshine as we cross over to the enclosure. One can now observe the 5 shorter pagodas which dot the interior of the temple. They are formed precisely like the pyramidal towers, which mark the entrance gateways of the high-walled quadrangle. I examine the one which stands near me and arrive at the conclusion that it is built of brick and that its decorated surface is not really stone-carved, but modeled out of baked clay or some durable plaster. Some of the figures have evidently been picked out with paint, but the colors have now faded. We enter the enclosure, and after wandering through more long, dark passages in this stupendous temple, my guide warns me that we are approaching the central shrine, where European feet may not walk. But though the Holy of Holies is forbidden to the infidel, yet the latter is allowed to catch a glimpse from the dark corridor which leads to the threshold. As if to confirm his warning, I hear the beating of drums, the banging of gongs, and the droning incantations of priests mingling into a monotonous rhythm that sounds rather eerie in the darkness of the old sanctuary. I take my glimpse expectantly Out of the gloom there arises a golden flame, set before an idol, 2 or 3 dim altar lights, and the sight of a few worshippers engaged in some ritual. I cannot distinguish the forms of the priestly musicians, but now I hear the conch horn and the cymbal add to their harsh, weird notes to the music. My companion whispers that it would be better for me not to stay any longer, as my presence will be decidedly unwelcome to the priests. Thereupon we withdraw into the somnolent sanctuary of the outer parts of the temple. My exploration is at an end. When we reach the gateway once more, I have to step aside because an elderly Brahmin sits on the ground in the middle of the path with a little brass water jug beside him. He paints a gaudy caste mark on his forehead, holding a broken bit of mirror in his left hand. The red and white trident, which presently appears on his brow, sign of an orthodox Hindu of the south, gives him, in Western eyes, the grotesque appearance of a clown, a shriveled old man who sits in a booth by the temple gates and sells little images of holy Shiva, raises his eyes to meet mine, and I pause to buy something at his unuttered request. Somewhere in the far end of the township, I espy the gleaming whiteness of a marble minaret. So I leave the temple and drive to the local mosque. Something inside me always thrills to the graceful arches of a mosque and to the delicate beauty of cupolas. Once again, I remove my shoes and enter the charming white building. How well it has been planned, for its vaulted height inevitably elevates one's mood. There are a few worshippers present. They sit, kneel, or prostrate themselves upon their small, colorful prayer rugs. There are no mysterious shrines here. No gaudy images of the prophet has written that nothing shall come between a man and God, not even a priest. All worshippers are equal before the face of Allah. There is neither priest nor pundit, no hierarchy of superior beings to impose themselves in a man's thoughts when he turns towards Mecca. As we return through the main street, I note the money changers' booths, the sweetmeat stalls, the cloth merchant's shop, and the sellers of grain and rice, all existing for the benefit of pilgrims to the ancient sanctuary, which has called the place into being. I am now eager to get back to the Maharishi, and the driver urges his pony to cover the distance, which lies before us at a rapid pace. I turn my head and take a final glimpse of the temple of Arunachala. The 9 sculptured towers rise like pylons into the air. They speak to me of the patient toil in the name of God, which has gone into the making of the old temple, for it has undoubtedly taken more than a man's lifetime to construct. And again, that queer reminiscence of Egypt penetrates my mind. Even the domestic architecture of its streets possesses an Egyptian character in the low houses and the thick walls. Shall a day ever come when these temples will be abandoned and left silent and deserted to crumble slowly into the red and gray dust whence they have emerged? Or will man find new gods and build new fanes wherein to worship them? While our pony gallops along the roads towards the hermitage which lies on one of the slopes of yonder rock-strewn hill, I realize with a catch in my breath that nature is unrolling an entire pageant of beauty before our eyes. How often have I waited for this hour in the east, when the sun with much splendor goes to rest upon its bed of night, an oriental sunset holds the heart with its lovely play of vivid colors, and yet the whole event is over so quickly, an affair of less than half an hour. Those lingering autumn evenings of Europe are almost unknown here. Out in the west, a great flaming ball of fire begins its visible descent into the jungle. It assumes the most striking orange hue as a prelude to its rapid disappearance from the vault of heaven. The sky around it takes on all the colors of the spectrum, providing our eyes with an artistic feast which no painter could ever provide. The fields and groves around us have entered into an entranced stillness. No more can be the chirruping of little birds be heard. The chatter of wild monkeys has come to an end. The giant circle of red fire is quickly fading into some other dimension. Evening's curtain falls thicker yet, and soon the whole panorama of thrusting tongues of flame and outspread colors sinks away into darkness. The calmness sinks into my thoughts. The loveliness for all its touches, the loveliness of it all touches my heart. How can one forget these benign minutes which the fates have proportioned us, when they make us play with the thought that under the cruel face of life a benevolent and beautiful power may be hiding? These minutes put our commonplace hours to shame. Out of the dark void they come like meteors, to light a transient trail of hope, and then to pass away from our ken. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. Fireflies whirl about the hermitage garden, drawing strange patterns of light on the background of darkness as we drive into the palm-fringed courtyard. And when I enter the long hall and drop to a seat on the floor, the sublime silence appears to have reached this place and pervaded the air. The assembled company squats in rows around the hall, but among them there is no noise and no talk. Upon the corner couch sits the Maharaji, his feet folded beneath him, his hands resting unconcernedly upon his knees. His figure strikes me anew as being simple, modest, yet withal it is dignified and impressive. His head is nobly poised, like the head of some Homeric sage. His eyes gaze immobily toward the far end of the hall. That strange steadiness of sight is as puzzling as ever. Has he been merely watching through the window the last ray of light fade out of the sky? Or is he so wrapped in some dreamlike abstraction as to see naught of this material world at all? The usual cloud of incense floats among the wooden rafters of the roof. I settle down and try to fix my eyes on the Maharaji, but after a while feel the delicate urge to close them. It is not long before I fall into a half-sleep, lulled by the intangible peace which in the sage's proximity begins to penetrate me more deeply. Ultimately, there comes a gap in my consciousness, and then I experience a vivid dream. It seems that I have become a little boy of 5. I stand on a rough path which winds up and around the sacred hill of Arunachala, and hold the Maharishi's hand. But now He is a great towering figure at my side, for he seems to have grown to giant size. He leads me away from the hermitage, and despite the impenetrable darkness of the night, guides me along the path which we slowly walk together. After a while, the stars and the moon conspire to bestow a faint light upon our surroundings. I notice that the Maharishi carefully guides me around fissures in the rocky soil and between monstrous boulders that are shakily perched. The hill is steep, and our ascent is slow, hidden in narrow clefts between the rocks and boulders, or sheltered by clusters of low bushes. Tiny hermitages and inhabited caves come into view. As we pass by, the inhabitants emerge to greet us, and although their forms take on a ghostly appearance in the starlight, I recognize that they are yogis of varying kinds. We never stop for them but continue to walk until the top of the peak is reached. We halt at last, my heart throbbing with a strange anticipation of some momentous event about to befall me. The Maharishi turns and looks down into my face. I, in turn, gaze expectantly up at him. I become aware of a mysterious change taking place with great rapidity in my heart and mind. The old motives which have lured me on begin to desert me. The urgent desires which have sent my feet hither and thither vanish with incredible swiftness. The dislikes, misunderstandings, coldnesses, and selfishness which have marked my dealings with many of my fellows collapse into an abyss of nothingness. An untellable peace falls upon me, and I know now that there is nothing further that I shall ask from life. Suddenly, the Maharishi bids me to turn my gaze away to the bottom of the hill. I obediently do so, and to my astonishment discover that the western hemisphere of our globe lies stretched out far below. It is crowded with millions of people. I can vaguely discern them as masses of forms, but the night's darkness still enshrouds them. The sage's voice comes to my ears, his words slowly uttered. When you go back there, you shall have this peace which you now feel, but its price will be that you shall henceforth cast aside the idea that you are this body or this brain. When this peace will flow into you, then you shall have to forget your own self, for you will have turned your life over to that. And the Maharishi places one end of a thread of silver light in my hand. I awaken from that extraordinarily vivid dream with a sense of penetrating sublimity yet upon me. Immediately the Maharishi's eyes meet mine. His face is now turned in my direction, and he is looking fixedly into my eyes. What lies behind the dream? For the desires and bitterness of personal life fade for a while into oblivion. That condition of lofty indifference to self and profound pity for my fellows, which I have dreamt into being, does not take its departure even though I am now awake. 'Tis a strange experience, but if the dream has any verity in it, then the thing will not last. But if the dream has any verity in it, then the thing will not last. It is not yet for me. How long have I sunk in dream? For everyone in the hall now begins to rise and to prepare for sleep. I must perforce follow the example. It is too stuffy to sleep in that long, sparsely ventilated hall, so I choose the courtyard. A tall, gray-bearded disciple brings me a lantern and advises me to keep it burning throughout the night. There is a possibility of unwelcome visitors such as snakes and even cheetahs, but they are likely to keep clear of a light. The earth is baked hard, and I possess no mattress, with the result that I do not fall asleep for some hours. But no matter, I have enough to think over, for I feel that in the Maharishi I have met the most mysterious personality whom life has yet brought within the orbit of my experience. The sage seems to carry something of great moment to me, yet I cannot easily determine its precise nature. It is intangible, imponderable, perhaps spiritual. Each time I think of him tonight, each time I remember that vivid dream, a peculiar sensation pierces me and causes my heart to throb with vague but lofty expectations. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. This is a continuation of Chapter 9. During the ensuing days, I endeavored to get into closer contact with the Maharishi, but fail. There are 3 reasons for this failure. The first arises naturally out of his own reserved nature, his obvious dislike of argument and discussion, his stolid indifference to one's beliefs and opinions. It becomes perfectly obvious that the sage has no wish to convert anyone to his own ideas, whatever they may be, and no desire to add a single person to his following. The second cause is certainly a strange one, but nevertheless it exists. Since the evening of that peculiar dream, I feel a great awe whenever I enter his presence. The questions, which would otherwise have come chatteringly from my lips, are hushed, because it seems almost sacrilege to regard him as a person with whom I can talk and argue on an equal plane, so far as common humanity is concerned. The third cause of my failure is simple enough. Almost always there are several other persons present in the hall, and I feel disinclined to bring out my private thoughts in their presence. After all, I am a stranger to them and a foreigner in this district. That I voice in a different language to some of them is a fact of little import, but that I possess a cynical, skeptical outlook unstirred by religious emotion is a fact of much import when I attempt to give utterance to that outlook. I have no desire to hurt their pious susceptibilities, but I also have no desire to discuss matters from an angle which makes little appeal to me. So, to some extent, this thing makes me tongue-tied. It's not easy to find a smooth way across all 3 barriers. Several times I am on the point of putting a question to the Maharishi, but one of the 3 factors intervenes to cause my failure. My proposed weekend quickly passes, and I extend it to a week. The first conversation which I have had with the Maharishi, worthy of the name, is likewise the last. Beyond 1 or 2 quite perfunctory and conventional scraps of talk, I find myself unable to get to grips with the man. The week passes, and I extend it to a fortnight. Each day I sense the beautiful peace of the sage's mental atmosphere, the serenity which pervades the very air around him. The last day of my visit arrives, and yet I am no closer to him. My stay has been a tantalizing mixture of sublime moods and disappointing failures to effect any worthwhile personal contact with the Maharishi. I look around the hall and feel a slight despondency. Most of these men speak a different language, both outwardly and inwardly. How can I hope to come closer to them? I look at the sage himself. He sits there on Olympian heights and watches the panorama of life as one apart. There is a mysterious property in this man which differentiates him from the others I have met. I feel, however, that he does not belong to us, the human race, so much as he belongs to nature, to the solitary peak which rises abruptly behind the hermitage, to the rough tract of jungle which stretches away into distant forests, and to the impenetrable sky which fills all space. Something of the stony, motionless quality of lonely Arunachala seems to have entered into the Maharishi. I have learned that he has lived on the hill for 30 years and refuses to leave it, even for a single short journey. Such a close association must inevitably have its effects on a man's character. I know that he loves this hill, for someone has translated a few lines of a charming but pathetic poem which the sage has written to express this love. Just as this isolated hill rises out of the jungle's edge and rears its squat head to the sky, so does this strange man raise his own head in solitary grandeur, nay, in uniqueness, out of the jungle of common humanity. Just as Arunachala, hill of the sacred beacon, stands aloof, apart from the irregular chain of hills which girdles the entire landscape, so does the Maharishi remain mysteriously aloof, even when surrounded by his own devotees, men who have loved him and lived near him for years. The impersonal, impenetrable quality of all nature, so peculiarly exemplified in this sacred mountain, has somehow entered into him. It has segregated him from his weaker fellows, perhaps forever. Sometimes I catch myself wishing that he would be a little more human, a little more susceptible to what seems so normal to us, but so like feeble failings when exhibited in his impersonal presence. And yet, if he has really attained to some sublime realization beyond the common, how can one expect him to do so without passing beyond man, without leaving his laggard race behind forever? Why is it that under his strange glance I invariably experience a peculiar expectancy, as though some stupendous revelation will soon be made to me? Yet, beyond the moods of palpable serenity and the dream which stars itself in the sky of memory, no verbal or other revelation has been communicated to me. I feel somewhat desperate at the pressure of time, almost a fortnight gone and only a single talk that means anything. Even the abruptness of the sage's voice has helped, metaphorically, to keep me off. This unwanted reception is also unexpected, for I have not forgotten the glowing inducements to come here with which the yellow-robed holy man plied me. The tantalizing thing is that I want the sage, above all men, to loosen his tongue for me, because a single thought has somehow taken possession of my mind. I do not obtain it by any process of ratiocination. It comes unbidden, entirely of its own accord. This man has freed himself from all problems, and no woe can touch him. Such is the purport of this dominating thought. I resolve to make a fresh attempt to force my questions into voice and to engage the Maharishi in answer to them. I go out to one of his old disciples who is doing some work in the adjoining cottage and who has been exceedingly kind to me, and I tell him earnestly of my wish to have a final chat with his master. I confess that I feel too shy to tackle the sage myself. The disciple smiles compassionately. He leaves me and soon returns with the news that his master will be very pleased to grant the interview. I hasten back to the hall and sit down conveniently near the divan. The Maharishi turns his face immediately, his mouth relaxing into a pleasant greeting. Straightway I feel at ease and I begin to question him. The yogis say that one must renounce this world and go off into secluded jungles or mountains if one wishes to find the truth. Such things can hardly be done in the West. Our lives are so different. Do you agree with the yogis? The Maharishi turns to a Brahmin disciple of courtly countenance. The latter translates his answer to me. The life of action need not be renounced. If you will meditate for an hour or two every day, you can then carry on with your duties. If you meditate in the right manner, then the current of mind induced will continue to flow even in the midst of your work. It is as though there were two ways of expressing the same idea, the same line, which you take in meditation will be expressed in your activities. What will be the result of doing that? As you go on, you will find that your attitude towards people, events, and objects will gradually change. Your actions will tend to follow your meditations of their own accord. Then you do not agree with the yogis. I try to pin him down, but the Maharishi eludes a direct question. A man should surrender the personal selfishness which binds him to this world. Giving up the false self is the true renunciation. How is it possible to become selfless while leading a life of worldly activity? There is no conflict between work and wisdom. Do you mean that one can continue all the old activities in one's profession, for instance, and at the same time get enlightenment? Why not? But in that case, one will not think that it is the old personality which is doing the work, because one's consciousness will gradually become transferred until it is centered in that which is beyond the little self. If a man is engaged in work, there will be little time left for him to meditate. The Maharishi seems quite unperturbed at my poser. Setting apart time for meditation is only for the merest spiritual novices, he replies. A man who is advancing will begin to enjoy the deeper beatitude whether he is at work or not. While his hands are in society, he keeps his head cool in solitude. Then you do not teach the way of yoga. The yogi tries to drive his mind to the goal as a cowherd drives a bull with a stick. But on the path, the seeker coaxes the bull by holding out a handful of grass. How is that done? You have to ask yourself the question, who am I? This investigation will lead you, in the end, to the discovery of something within you, which is behind the mind. Solve that great problem and you will solve all other problems thereby. There is a pause as I try to digest his answer. From the square-framed and barred hole in the wall, which does duty as a window, as it does in many Indian buildings, I obtain a fine view of the lower slopes of the sacred hill. Its strange outline is bathed in the early morning sunlight. The Maharishi addresses me again. Will it be clearer if it is put this way? All human beings are ever wanting happiness. untainted with sorrow. They want to grasp a happiness which will not come to an end. The instinct is a true one, but have you ever been struck by the fact that they love their own selves most? Well, now relate that to the fact that they are ever desirous of attaining happiness, through one means or another, through drink or through religion, and you are provided with a clue to the real nature of man. I fail to see. The tone of his voice becomes higher. Man's real nature is happiness. Happiness is inborn in the true self. His search for happiness is an unconscious search for his true self. The true self is imperishable. Therefore, when man finds it, he finds a happiness which does not come to an end. But the world is so unhappy. Yes, but that is because the world is ignorant of its true self. All men, without exception, are consciously or unconsciously seeking for it. Even the wicked, the brutal, and the criminal, I ask. Even they sin because they are trying to find the self's happiness in every sin which they commit. This striving is instinctive in man, but they do not know that they are really seeking their true selves, and so they try these wicked ways first as a means of happiness. Of course, they are wrong ways, for a man's acts are reflected back to him. So we shall feel lasting happiness when we know the true self? The other nods his head. A slanting ray of sunlight falls through the unglazed window upon the Maharishi's face. There is serenity in that unruffled brow. There is contentment around that firm mouth. There is a shrine-like peace in those lustrous eyes. His unlined countenance does not belie his revelatory words. What does the Maharishi mean by these apparently simple sentences? The interpreter has conveyed their outward meaning to me in English. Yes, but there is a deeper purport which he cannot convey. I know that I must discover that for myself. The sage seems to speak not as a philosopher, not as a pundit trying to explain his own doctrine, but rather out of the depth of his own heart. Are these words the marks of his own fortunate experience? What exactly is this of which you speak? If what you say is true, then there must be another self in man. His lips curve in a smile for a moment. Can a man be possessed of two identities, two selves? He makes answer. To understand this matter, it is first necessary for a man to analyze himself, because it has long been his habit to think as others think. He has never faced this I in a true manner. He has not a correct picture of himself. He has too long identified himself with the body and the brain. Therefore, I tell you to pursue this inquiry. Who am I? He pauses to let the words soak into me. I listen eagerly to his next sentences. You ask me to describe this true self to you. What can be said? It is that out of which the sense of the personal I arises, and into which it shall disappear. Disappear? I echo back. How can one lose the feeling of one's personality? The first and foremost of all thoughts, the primeval thought in the mind of every man, is the thought I. It is only after the birth of this thought that any other thoughts can arise at all. It is only after the first pronoun I has arisen in the mind that the second personal pronoun, you, can make its appearance. If you could mentally follow the I thread until it leads back to its source, you would discover that just as it is the first thought to appear, so it is the last to disappear. This is a matter which can be experienced. You mean that it's perfectly possible to conduct a mental investigation into oneself? Assuredly, it is possible to go inward until the last thought I gradually vanishes. What is left, I query? Will a man then become quite unconscious, or will he become an idiot? Not so. On the contrary, he will attain that consciousness which is immortal, and he will become truly wise when he has awakened to his true self, which is the real nature of man. But surely the sense of I must also pertain to that, I persist. The sense of I pertains to the person, the body and brain, replies the Maharishi calmly. When a man knows his true self for the first time, something else arises from the depths of his being and takes possession of him. That something is behind the mind. It is infinite, divine, eternal. Some people call it the kingdom of heaven. Others call it the soul. Still others name it nirvana. And we Hindus call it liberation. You may give it what name you wish. When this happens, a man has not really lost himself. Rather, he has found himself. As the last words fall from the interpreter's lips, there flashes across my mind those memorable words which were uttered by a wandering teacher in Galilee, words which have puzzled so many good persons. Whosoever shall seek to save his life shall lose it, and whosoever shall lose his life shall preserve it. How strangely similar are these two sentences, yet the Indian sage has arrived at the thought in his own non-Christian way, through a psychological path which seems exceedingly difficult and appears unfamiliar. The Maharishi speaks again, his words breaking into my thoughts. Unless and until a man embarks upon the quest of the true self, doubt and uncertainty will follow his footsteps throughout life. The greatest kings and statesmen try to rule others when in their heart of hearts they know they cannot rule themselves. Yet the greatest power is at the command of the man who has penetrated to his inmost depth. There are men of giant intellects who spend their lives gathering knowledge about many things. There are men of giant intellects who spend their lives gathering knowledge about many things. Ask these men if they have solved the mystery of man, if they have conquered themselves, and they will hang their heads in shame. What is the use of knowing about everything else when you do not yet know who you are? Men avoid this inquiry into the true self, but what else is there so worthy to be undertaken? That is such a difficult and superhuman task, I comment. The sage gives an almost imperceptible shrug of his shoulders. The question of its possibility is a matter of one's own experience. The difficulty is less real than you think. For us who are active, practical Westerners, such introspections, I begin doubtfully and leave my sentence trailing in mid-air. The Maharishi bends down to light a fresh joss stick, which will replace one whose red spark is dying out. The realization of truth is the same for both Indians and Europeans. Admittedly, the way to it may be harder for those who are engrossed in worldly life, but even then one can and must conquer. The current induced during meditation can be kept up by habit, by practicing to do so. Then one can perform this work and activities in that very current itself. There will be no break. Thus, too, there will be no difference between meditation and external activities. If you meditate on this question, who am I? If you begin to perceive that neither the body nor the brain nor the desires are really you, then the very attitude of inquiry will eventually draw the answer to you out of the depths of your own being. It will come to you of its own accord as a deep realization. Again, I ponder his words. Know the real self, he continues. Then the truth will shine forth within the heart like sunshine. The mind will become untroubled, and real happiness will flood it, for happiness and the true self are identical. You will have no more doubts once you attain this self-awareness. He turns his head and fixes his gaze at the far end of the hall. I know then that he has reached his conversational limit. Thus ends our last talk, and I congratulate myself that I have drawn him out of the shell of taciturnity before my departure. A Search in Secret India by Paul Brunton. And this last part is the conclusion of Chapter 9. I leave him and wander away to a quiet spot in the jungle, where I spend most of the day among my books and notes. When dusk falls, I return to the hall, for within an hour or two a pony carriage or bullock cart will arrive to bear me away from the hermitage. Burning incense makes the air odorous. The Maharishi has been half reclining under the waving punkah as I enter, but he soon sits up and assumes his favorite attitude. He sits with legs crossed, the right foot placed on the left thigh, and the left foot merely folded beneath the right thigh. I remember being shown a similar position by Brahma, the yogi, who lives near Madras, who calls it the comfortable posture. It is really a half Buddha posture and quite easy to do. The Maharishi, as is his wont, holds his chin in his right hand and rests the elbow on the knee. Next, he gazes attentively at me, but remains quite quiet. On the floor beside him, I notice a gourd shell, water jug, and his bamboo staff. They are his sole earthly possessions, apart from the strip of loincloth. What a mute commentary on our Western spirit of acquisitiveness. His eyes, always shining, steadily become more glazed and fixed. His body sets into a rigid pose. His head trembles slightly and then comes to rest. A few more minutes, and I can plainly see that he has re-entered the trance-like condition in which he was when I first met him. How strange that our parting shall repeat our meeting. Someone brings his face close to mine and whispers in my ear. The Maharishi has gone into holy trance. It is useless to talk now. A hush falls upon the little company. The minutes slowly pass, but the silence only deepens. I am not religious, but I can no more resist the feeling of increasing awe, which begins to grip my mind, than a bee can resist a flower in all its luscious bloom. The hall is becoming pervaded with a subtle, intangible, and indefinable power, which affects me deeply. I feel without doubt and without hesitation that the center of this mysterious power is no other than the Maharishi himself. His eyes shine with astonishing brilliance. Strange sensations begin to arise in me. Those lustrous orbs seem to be peering into the inmost recesses of my soul. In a peculiar way, I feel aware of everything he can see in my heart. His mysterious glance penetrates my thoughts, my emotions, and my desires. I am helpless before it. At first, this disconcerting gaze troubles me. I become vaguely uneasy. I feel that he has perceived pages that belong to a past which I have forgotten. He knows it all. I am certain I am powerless to escape. However, I do not want to either. Some curious intimation of future benefit forces me to endure that pitiless gaze. And so he continues to catch the feeble quality of my soul for a while, to perceive the motley past, to sense the mixed emotions which have drawn me this way and that. But I feel that he understands also what mind-devastating quest has impelled me to leave the common way and to seek out such men as he. There comes a perceptible change in the telepathic current which plays between us. The while my eyes blink frequently, but his remain without the least tremor. I become aware that he is definitely linking my own mind with his, that he is provoking my heart into a state of starry calm, which he seems perpetually to enjoy. In this extraordinary peace, I find a sense of exaltation and lightness. Time seems to stand still. My heart is released from its burden of care. Never again, I feel, shall the bitterness of anger and the melancholy of unsatisfied desire affect me. I realize deeply that the profound instinct which is innate in the race, which bids man look up, which encourages him to hope on, and which sustains him when life has darkened, is a true instinct, for the essence of being is good. In this beautiful entranced silence, when the clock stands still, and the sorrows and arrows of the past seem like trivialities, my mind is being submerged in that of the Maharishi, and wisdom is now at its perihelion. What is this man's gaze but a thaumaturgic wand which evokes a hidden world of unexpected splendor before my profane eyes? I have sometimes asked myself why these disciples have been staying around the sage for years with few conversations, fewer comforts, and no external activities to attract them. Now I begin to understand, not by thought, but by lightning light illumination, that through all those years they have been receiving deep and silent reward. Hitherto, everyone in the hall has been hushed to a death-like stillness. At length, someone quietly rises and passes out. He is followed by another, and then another, until all have gone. I am alone with the Maharishi. Never before has this happened. His eyes begin to change. They narrow down to pinpoints. The effect is curiously like the stopping down in the focus of a camera lens. There comes a tremendous increase in the intense gleam which shines between the lids now almost closed. Suddenly my body seems to disappear. and we are both out in space. It is a crucial moment. I hesitate. I decide to break this enchanter's spell. Decision brings power, and once again I am back in the flesh, back in the hall. No word passes from me to him. I extrovert my faculties, look at the clock, and rise quietly. The hour of departure has arrived. I bow my head in farewell. The sage silently acknowledges the gesture. I utter a few words of thanks. Again he silently nods his head. I linger reluctantly at the threshold. Outside, I hear the tinkle of a bell. The bullock cart has arrived. Once more I raise my hands, palms touching, and so we part.